Robservations with Robert, Meyer, Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your evangelist of the imagination, and, of course, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I, of course, am robcasting you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This will be Robservations episode number 652. A little different today. You know, I'm not going to talk about the Snyder Cut or, well, probably will, reading your letters. I know that the Justice is Gray edition, that's right, you can watch all 4 hours of the Snyder Cut in black and white, dropped on HBO Max. Check it out. I think I'm going to, by the way. But to be honest, while it's not going to be about the Snyder Cut, in a way, maybe it's because all the thinking I've been doing about the Snyder Cut led me to this article that I want to get into today, which is more about academia and the humanities. And, of course, what struck me, what made me read this article was the title, Grand Narratives. I just poached the title of this article, which I'm going to read for today's topic. Today earlier, I was going back and forth on Twitter with apparently some Orthodox Jews who were taking me to task about the accuracy of the characters in Tango Shalom. Legitimate concern. But it was interesting. They haven't seen a movie. They've only seen the trailer, and I was being sort of, all of us, anybody involved in the film was being questioned, which is fair. And then it really got me thinking. I'm like, but you haven't seen the movie, And the thing is, we actually shot the movie in the community that it's actually about. And there was lots of, I was asked if there were sensitivity readers for the script. I don't believe in sensitivity readers, frankly, because if you have a script, who are they sensitive towards? Are they sensitive toward everyone? Like if you were going to do a movie about, say, a police investigation, do the sensitivity readers take into consideration the police? Or do they only take into consideration the victims of whatever crime is being investigated? What do sensitivity readers do? And how exactly do they, how are they qualified to be sensitivity readers? Do they teach that in college? Can you get a degree? Look, I'm obviously being a little glib about the whole thing, but I think the idea of sensitivity readers, I wish people, in a way, maybe we should have sensitivity life leaders, so people can lead your life in a more sensitive fashion, so they can impart to you lessons about your own life that you might be able to help from, so you don't fuck your life up enough. I mean, it's such a weird thing. Did you have sensitivity readers? I wouldn't have even thought about that. I don't believe in it. I think sensitivity reading is inherently, censorship in a way, because from what perspective are sensitivity readers coming from? Who are they being sensitive towards? I mean, usually when you have sensitivity readers, you're only talking about one aspect of a story, not every aspect of a story. But be that as it may. So I started listening to this, and I was, reading, and I was just wondering, I was thinking about obviously you want to bring, of course, verisimilitude to your story. So in the case of Tango Shalom, it is a fable. It is a movie. It's more of a magical realist movie than anything else, I would say. And it's, while it's set in a certain milieu, and we want that milieu to be as accurate as possible, the fact is it's a fable. And there are certain things, like, for instance, that we needed as the engine of the plot, meaning a Orthodox Jewish rabbi probably would never go ask religious leaders of other faiths for advice. I was told that a rabbi, if they believed or they dreamt of God, it wouldn't cause them to question their beliefs or break tradition or faith. And that's probably true, but in this movie, the the message from God is, Well, I don't necessarily think many people would get messages from God that would push you to go to learn tango dance either. So the question remains, what's more important? Is the narrative more important? Is the getting the details right more important? I think it's a combination of all of those things, really. But anyway, I was just thinking about all of that stuff, and I came across this article, and I wanted to share it with you because I went to the Evergreen State College, which was a traditionally liberal college that was born in 1967. A lot of people might have heard about it because of the student uprising that happened in 2017. Obviously, I thought about it a lot because the Evergreen State College that I went to back in the 80s is very different from where Evergreen is now. College students are very different than they were when I was there. And I think the idea of the grand narratives as far as liberal arts education is concerned, well, that's certainly changed as well. And I found this article, and it's long, but I wanted to share it because it's what I was thinking about today. And, you can only think about superhero movies and action figures and comic books and theaters and all that stuff for so long. You need more for the soul, I think. And so this is kind of all. I'm going to read this article, and I want to know what you guys think of it. And it was on Quillette. A lot of people, Quillette, and it's called, the article is published today, written by Sarah Cederberg, wrote this article, and it's entitled Culture, the Humanities, and the Collapse of the Grand Narratives. I mean, come on. How could I not want to read this article? Since the late 1950s, scholars and critics have proclaimed the decline and fall of the liberal arts. The crisis in the humanities is, as Jeffrey Galt Harpham argued in The Humanities and the Dream of America, no longer an affliction but a way of life. It is simply hard to imagine the humanities not being in a crisis. Perhaps we cling to this notion because a crisis is at least something we can overcome. If we discuss the death of humanities, all hope is lost. To really understand what has happened to the humanities, we need to analyze the state of Western culture as a whole, rather than treating that crisis as an isolated phenomenon in academia. A quick look at the current debate indicates that there are two types of argument in circulation regarding this matter. The first deals with external factors and focuses primarily on socioeconomic changes, while the second deals with changes from within the humanities and the transformation of the academic landscape in the past 50 years. The socioeconomic arguments are based on data indicating that the number of humanities graduates has declined rapidly since the financial crisis in 2008. Naturally, many people seek to give an economic explanation, arguing that the weak job prospects are the cause of this decline. In an article for The Atlantic, history professor Benjamin Schmidt develops this argument further. He identifies three eras in the history of the humanities at American universities that can be observed in the wider socioeconomic context. From 1955 to the early 1970s, the universities expanded from elite institutions to centers of learning for larger segments of the population, and hordes of students poured into the humanities. In the 1970s, the economy slowed, as did the growth of the universities, and the interest in obtaining college degrees in the humanities declined nationwide. Around 1985, the situation stabilized, and the number of humanities majors remained about the same until the financial crisis in 2008. Although the economy recovered, the number of humanities majors continued to drop. The plunge affects a wide range of universities, including elite institutions, and can be seen among both men and women and across racial groups. Schmitz speculates that the financial crisis of 2008 altered students' perceptions of what the purpose of a university education is. In response to economic uncertainty, students adopted a mechanical view of higher education, where the process of learning becomes a matter of gathering tools and skills that fit the existing job market. It is important to note that these data can be interpreted very differently depending on what is included in the humanities. Jordan Weissman, a former editor of Atlantic, argued in a 2013 essay that even if the number of majors in the traditional fields of the humanities, such as history, literature, and philosophy, were as low 30 years previously, the total amount of students holding a college degree in the arts had actually risen. The reason for this is that both the humanities disciplines and the number of university students have multiplied. Like Schmidt, Wiseman points out that the aim of university education has transformed over the past 50 years, but unlike Schmidt, he does not consider whether this is a good or a bad thing. The purpose of Wiseman's article is to show that fears of a crisis in the humanities are a result of a misunderstanding of the available evidence. He concludes that the focus of higher education has shifted from the idealistic pursuit of a life of the mind towards specialization and professionalism. Not only do college degrees now cover professions that used to be regarded as skilled labor, such as nurses and police officers, but the theoretical education of doctoral candidates also includes job market skills. According to Wiseman, today's students are older and more professional than the students of the 1960s who studied the classics purely out of intellectual curiosity. Discussion of socioeconomic changes in society leads us to the other argument in this debate, which has to do with the evolution of the humanities as an academic field. Both Schmidt and Wiseman observe that, while traditional fields of the liberal arts are in decline, the younger disciplines are faring quite well. The only branch of the humanities which sees no decline in college degrees is cultural studies, which can be described as a mix of theoretical approaches to the study of human culture, including everything from gender and racial studies to ethnology. If there is a shift in perception among students and scholars that needs to be examined, it is the fall of the traditional disciplines and the triumph of cultural studies. No scholar who participates in the debate about the crisis in the humanities seems to need to explain why cultural studies is important, while they go out of their way to make the case for literature, philosophy, and history. Why have the traditional humanistic disciplines lost their ground? New York Times columnist David Brooks argues that the root cause of the crisis is a lack of purpose. Humanist scholars have abandoned their mission to cultivate the human soul. As cultural studies emerged, the humanities turned from an inward to an outward focus, and the old notions of truth, beauty, and virtue were exchanged for political categories of race, gender, and other markers of identity. One might contend that the humanities had an outward focus even before cultural studies entered the scene. Not so long ago, the cultivation of the soul was regarded as a social mission. The older disciplines, which grew and flourished in the first half of the 20th century, were deeply interlinked with the narratives of the notion and Enlightenment, narratives of the nation and Enlightenment. From the national point of view, the purpose of the historian was to serve as the memory and the storyteller of the state, while literary scholars were concerned with the preservation and cultivation of the nation's soul. In this historical setting, the purpose of liberal arts education was to offer young Americans the broad knowledge base needed to develop into the morally and intellectually mature citizens that a liberal democracy demands. Now, before I go on, I just want to point out that one of the things that I've loved about science fiction, fantasy, horror, genre literature is genre literature almost seems to be exclusively, in a way, whether you're reading a horror novel, whether you're reading YA fiction like The Hunger Games, whether I'm watching Star Wars or mostly Star Trek. All of these things basically, hopefully, nourish the human soul and offer, even within a fantasy context, they kind of offer, like all of us, I think, want to have the strength within us to be Katniss Everdeen. You know, I mean, that's why we have these heroes. And whether you're watching the Marvel movies, whether you're watching DC films, whatever it is that you're loving, whatever you're consuming, even if it's a video game, The Last of Us, the characters in those games, in a game like that, are striving to find the humanity within themselves to triumph over civilization that is now doing everything it can to strip, or lack thereof, which is doing everything it can to strip away our humanity. And yet, somehow, all of these stories are about retaining humanity in the face of maybe insurmountable odds, great odds. But I thought it was interesting. From the national point of view, meaning the American point of view, the purpose of the historian was to serve as the memory and storyteller of the state, while literary scholars were concerned with the preservation and cultivation of the nation's soul. Well, I kind of feel the same way. Let's put the idea of the fan in there. From the fan's point of view, the purpose of the documentarian was to serve as the memory and storyteller of the creators of whatever it is that you love to consume. As a documentarian myself with 20 years of experience working on DVD special features, we would go in and we would document the making of movies, the how and why of these things, where do they come from, why did they come from, and then the literary scholars, and to me, the scholars were the actual filmmakers, the video game designers, or whatever. The scholars were concerned with the preservation and cultivation of the nation's or fans' soul. I think all of us, anybody who's an imagination connoisseur, is attracted to the grand narratives, whether you're reading about the DC or Marvel universes, Star Wars, Star Trek, that ultimately these things, the reason we're attracted to these things in the first place is because they're about the kind of human beings that we want to be. At least that's how I've always thought of it. I mean, I looked at Captain Kirk. I never thought one day I could be Captain Kirk. I always thought that one day I could be like Captain Kirk in the opportunities that are afforded to me here on Earth. The idea of boldly going, I always thought, oh, there's a good philosophy of life. Boldly go where you've never gone before, and take your friends with you and always aspire to do the best you can. And when you meet new people, be open to those ideas and open to who they are. And hopefully you can share, and in the sharing, grow. It's kind of what I always thought. Now, what I am seeing is that our narratives, the grand narratives, just like the humanities, and I mean grand narratives by whether it's Lord of the Rings, whether it's Star Trek, whether it's Star Wars, they, like academia, like the study of humanities, are being infiltrated by, say, cultural studies or gender studies. And these stories are being chipped away at. The grand narratives are being chipped away at because no longer are they looked at as being things about the get rid of the hashtag get rid of the texts or whatever that hashtag is. Let's get rid of all of these traditional texts. The texts are, an old white cis guy or Shakespeare wrote this. What does he have to say to everyone else? And my retort would be that a lot of these great grand narratives, and all the grand narratives, whether you're reading the science fiction of Octavia Butler or Ursula K. Le Guin, or you're reading Tolkien, or you're reading Stephen King, whoever it is you're going to read, all of the narratives that they're writing, it doesn't matter from what culture that they come from, the real great grand narratives speak to all of us. They speak to all of us, and yet a lot of them are being twisted and micromanaged and are no longer about, humanity as a whole. They're subdividing humanity into, they have to be shown as being, we have to make sure that every human being is represented properly. Now, what does that do to the grand narrative? Anyway, I wanted to go, let me continue. So in this article, as cultural studies emerged, the humanities turned from an inward to an outward focus, and the old notions of truth, beauty, and virtue were exchanged for political categories of race, gender, and other markers of identity. I see that happening, certainly, to our grand narratives. The purpose of a liberal arts education was to offer young Americans, or anyone, the broad knowledge base needed to develop into the morally and intellectually mature citizens that a liberal democracy demands. I think that's probably a very good thing. Over the past 50 years, these grand narratives were overthrown. New narratives in academic fields, though less unified, have emerged. The traditional disciplines are still adrift without any solid attachment in time and space. The biggest problem for the traditional humanities disciplines is not cultural studies, but the fact that there is no longer a case to be made for the cultivation of the soul. This problem is not new. It has evolved over centuries and is intimately linked with the battle between the arts and the sciences, which dates back to the schism between utilitarians and romantics. The greater historical force behind this development is the secularization process, the triumph of science as the dominant cultural force in Western society. The concept of the humanities first emerged in the U.S. in the mid-20th century as a response to a radical form of secularism that flourished among scholars and intellectuals of the time, positivism. The positive philosophy held that the only knowledge worth pursuing, the only truth, was that produced by the natural sciences. Thus, the origin of the term the humanities and the debate about its crisis are closely tied to the fear that the cultural memory and activity in society would be obliterated by a one-dimensional focus on science. Over the past 70 years, however, the positivist narrative has disintegrated. After World War II, Western intellectuals became painfully aware that while science could be used for the betterment of human life, it could also be used to inflict great harm. In 1949, Albert Einstein concluded that the machinery and technology had made the struggle for life more severe to the detriment of Western culture because it greatly restrained the possibility for self-cultivation. But he remained optimistic. In his view, the decline was only a temporary setback caused by the rapid progression of modern civilization. Once science and technology had been tamed by the ideals of a righteous and humane society, human culture would blossom once more. An idealist at heart, Einstein hoped that Western societies would embrace socialism, believing that the just division of labor would leave time for the free development of the individual. Well, that did not happen. Instead, science came to dominate more and more of Western culture until the pursuit of scientific truth became the sole purpose not only of scientists, but of literary scholars and historians as well. In the absence of the grand narrative, science became ideological. In 1959, chemist and novelist C.P. Snow published a highly influential essay titled The Two Cultures and the Scientific Revolution, in which he praised the progressive work of scientists while viciously attacking the conservatism of Britain's literary intellectuals. Snow dismissed literary criticism as a self-indulgent pursuit and accused literary scholars of clinging to the past, refusing to address real-world problems. In 1964, British historian J.H. Plumb published the anthology Crisis in the Humanities, in which several of Cambridge's most prominent humanities professors warned that a world focused on science left no room for human pursuits. In the mid-70s, the era of radical enlightenment came to an end as more and more intellectuals questioned the meaning and usefulness of the positivist approach to humanistic scholarship. The rise of Marxist cultural radicalism on the campuses of Western universities in the late 1960s was at its core a passionate rejection of the Enlightenment narrative. Students and scholars believed that science and technology had allied with soulless consumerism and drained human life of existential meaning. Many humanists tried to reintroduce Marxism as a grand narrative, hoping that dialectical theory and socialist ethics could bestow upon the modern humanities a strong social mission. Once again, it did not happen, partly because these socialist states, which were supposed to serve as proof of the superiority of Marxist ideology, rapidly crumbled under the weight of their own corruption, and partially because the moral and cultural relativism inherent in positivism could not be eradicated from the Western mind. A second phase in the debate about the crisis in the humanities began in the late 1980s, when American philosopher Allen Bloom published his unexpected 1987 bestseller, The Closing of the American Mind. The defenders of the liberal arts tradition now switched political color. It was primarily conservative critics and commentators who embraced Bloom's message. The closing of the American mind is a defense of the social mission of self-cultivation, an ideal which, in Bloom's opinion, had nothing to do with political ideologies. According to Bloom, the moral and cultural vacuum left by positivism opened young people up to a decadent and meaningless lifestyle. He also believed that this spiritual void had paved the way for the cultural radicalism of the 1960s, which he regarded as deeply totalitarian and a threat to the very foundation of democracy. To conquer this menace, Bloom suggested that liberal arts education should return to its roots and let students acquaint themselves with the great minds of the Western tradition. Not because the canon is an indisputable entity of greatness, but because it is a map of what has been thought and said and imagined throughout history, which offers the best starting point for young people to embark on their own intellectual journeys. Oh, hold on, I must plug my keyboard in. Then in 2010, Martha Nussbaum published a book that sparked further debate. Not for Profit: Why Democracy Needs the Humanities. The sweep of the book is similar to Bloom, as Nussbaum focuses on the role of education in our culture at large, the development of citizenship, the shaping of moral character, and the evolution of critical thinking. Today, the idea that science is the sole engine of civilization, champion of democracy, and savior of mankind is as much a narrative of the past as the belief that the liberal arts can foster democratic citizens, or so it would seem. In recent years, social scientists have taken on the role of moral educators, in much the same way that humanities scholars did 50 years ago. Psychologists like Jonathan Haidt and Jordan Peterson have found a way to deliver their message and their research not only to their immediate audience within the research community, but to millions of ordinary people within wider society. As trained psychologists, they specialize in matters of the human mind and soul, just like the theologians and philosophers of old. These modern scientists offer solutions to real-life problems and tools for emotional, intellectual, and spiritual growth. In ancient Greece, medicine inspired the birth of philosophy. Plato modeled his philosophical method after the practice of medicine and integrated the study of the human soul into a holistic education with the goal of creating morally and intellectually healthy citizens. Peterson has emphasized the importance of literature, especially classical myths and the books of the Bible, which make up our cultural history, to the development of human character. In this endeavor, he combines the roles of traditional historian and literary scholar, as well as the roles of priest and philosopher. The massive success of Peterson's books and lectures shows that people still have an enormous interest in and need for traditional humanistic culture in their lives. There is a rich flora of contemporary humanistic thought about the role of literature in contemporary life and society. Literary scholars such as Northrop Frye and Joseph Campbell have also reached a big audience outside their academic institutions. Their works nourish human creativity and inspire many other artists and writers. It is time for humanities scholars to rise to the occasion and use their knowledge in the most powerful way it can be used, to keep our culture alive. Now, the woman who wrote this, Sarah Cederberg, is a postdoctoral fellow at the Department of English in Carleton University in Ottawa. You can follow her on Twitter at Sarah Cederberg4. That's SARACEDERBERG 4. Now, I really liked this article. I thought it was pretty great, but in my mind, I couldn't help but always substitute imagination connoisseurs for classical literature or the humanities. Because for me, whereas I might not have a great working knowledge of the great classics of literature, I have a pretty good working knowledge of the classics of, say, cinema. And I would say much of cinema, for me, the great 20th century art form, yes, I know it began in the 19th century, but really it came into its own as the great art form that it is in the 20th century. And I think as a lifelong cinema fan, I think there's almost no better way than to instill a sense of joy and wonder and romance and love and indeed spirituality than through cinema. Because after all, cinema is an art form that is exciting all the senses in many different ways. And I think that one of the things that's made me love cinema so much is all of the great movies. They're all literature, and they all are speaking to how good can we be, how should we seek to make our lives fulfilled, and what does it all mean? and doing that with sound and image and story all at one time, I don't think there's any more potent or powerful way to do that. And it's very interesting. I see so much of what we consume now, the idea of the grand narratives. The idea, and I'm thinking about grand narratives, maybe not the same way this article is thinking about grand narratives. The grand narrative of the humanities. I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about the grand narrative of humanity. And what I see is, like in the humanities, I see our storytelling is being undermined. It's no longer about great characters and great stories. It's more and more about politics or agenda or your universe. And those great stories and characters are taking a back seat to these, well, more political things, kind of exactly what happened in the humanities. I always thought one of the reasons to go to college in the first place was learn for learning's sake. It didn't matter what you learned. I mean, there's so much to know about the universe, so much to know about the world around us that no matter what it is, you get something out of it. There's some value there. I used to think that I didn't like country music, for example. It was only because I didn't really listen to country music. I was like, I'd hear some country song and it's not for me. But then I remember hearing like an album, Steve Earle and the Dukes, something like that. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's, and you find a way in. You can find a way into almost any subject. I felt that way about Westerns. I wasn't a big Western fan growing up because I was too much into science fiction, fantasy, and horror. But then started to see Westerns, and I realized, they're kind of dealing with the same tropes, just they don't have the technology, or they don't have they're so earthbound. But then you realize, you watch a movie like Unforgiven, and then, I remember seeing The Searchers, and I just got sucked in. I've told that story. I was sleeping at my friend Sean's, actually Kelly Goto's apartment, and woke up early in the morning, and The Searchers was on cable, and I had never seen it. And man, I just got sucked in. I wanted to go back to sleep, but I'm like, my God. Nowadays, people would say probably The Searchers is problematic because they would be too caught up in canceling John Wayne as a person. And I would think to myself, well, wait a minute, what about the movie? Are you watching the movie? Isn't the grand narrative of the movie that the movie? Why would you worry about what John Wayne said in real life as an actor when you're watching a film? I mean, I understand it's hard to separate the art from the artist, but when you're watching The Searchers, what does John Wayne's real life have to do with the movie that you're watching? Nothing, really. And so, anyway, I just thought it was something interesting to share and to think about, because I see that we all kind of are fans of these grand narratives, because what do? They nourish our souls. I think by loving not just science fiction, fantasy, horror, or imagination pursuits, but I think stories in general are something of value, and we learn from them. And the great stories, the stories that are true to themselves, they resonate through the years. You can go back to them again and again and again, and they matter. And I think one of the things, to bring it back to like the Snyder Cut, I've been reading science fiction and superhero short stories my entire life, or narratives, or novels, or whatever. And one of the things I liked about the Snyder Cut was, for all the criticisms people throw at it, it still felt like a grand narrative that combined science fiction, horror, superheroes, all of those things. And that was like the delicious chocolatey outside. But when you get into the caramel, peanut, nougat inside, it means something. It still has resonance. It can still matter to you. I mean, if you choose to let it. And that's what I'm always looking for. I think that's why I like science fiction, fantasy, and horror. I like imagination connoisseur stories, because they're delivering their messages of humanity and the potential of humanity in sort of the most delicious way, at least for me. And that's kind of how I've always looked at it. Anyway, that was what I was thinking about today, so you know where my head's at, folks. Your mileage may vary, but remember, that's why we're here, isn't it? Let's see. I've got This letter comes from Sky. Sky says, "Hi, Rob. A few episodes ago, you commented on the plan to have animated Star Trek added to CBS for the purpose of targeting younger viewers. I agree with you. Star Trek inherently applies to everyone. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my introduction to Star Trek. As a young lad, I'd get home from school and hope that I could catch Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, Xena Warrior Princess, or maybe Sequest. Instead, I'd come home and there would be reruns of TNG that my dad would watch. There was only one TV and no internet in my house, so I didn't have a choice. At first, I begrudgingly sat down to watch it. What else was I going to do? I wasn't particularly drawn to it. The uniforms looked strange to me, and the beginning was full of dialogue, while I was longing to watch Hercules punch something. However, to my surprise, by a third of the way through, I was intrigued and hooked. There was an interesting question that needed answering, or some difficult problem that needed a resolution. And how were they going to do it? I had to know. By the end of the episodes, I was almost always satisfied by the intellectual and entertaining journey. TNG was an introduction to many philosophical debates, scientific concepts, politics, dynamics in society that I didn't even understand yet, and reflections on the spirit of kindness and progress. I guess what I'm trying to say was that TNG was intriguing, thought-provoking, and it was a teacher. I didn't know then how important that was for me. Thank you for your time, Sky." Well, Sky, precisely, exactly, and that's one of my big frustrations with modern Star Trek. It is none of those things, and I don't understand why. So, yeah. This one comes from Hassan Chavez. "Hi, Bob. Let's talk about race, guns, conspiracy theory, and cancel culture." Just kidding. "I'm curious to know if you're excited for upcoming DC films. I get why they want to move on from the Snyderverse, but honestly, the new movies they have in development are not interesting to me at all. I could not care less about a Supergirl, Blue Beetle, Zatanna, or an alternate Superman. They could spend all the money on sequels Zack Snyder had envisioned. I hope the hashtag Restore the Snyderverse works, but again, the narrative is that those fans are way too toxic. Like they're not a part of the court of public opinion. I do believe the Snyder Cut was a hit." Well, thank you, Hassan. I think I have something to say about that, but I wanted to add something that Mike Bodden wrote in after reading Hassan's letter. Mike says, "Hassan makes an interesting point or two, but I'd like to offer my 2 cents worth." Now, this is Mike Bodden, my partner in this channel and also a moderator. "It seems," this is Mike's words, "Hassan makes an interesting point or two, but I'd like to offer my 2 cents worth. It seems that people have forgotten how DC Comics were built during the Silver Age versus the way Marvel operated. Marvel was an integrated universe with multiple storylines, frequent crossovers, and continuity between titles and characters that were more reminiscent of a soap opera than what we usually saw on TV or in the theater. Back in the day when a sequel was really something special and no one ever dreamed of a movie trilogy. DC, on the other hand, provided self-contained stories in their issues. Each issue had 1 or 2 adventures in it, and they very rarely continued arcs from one issue to the next, let alone between titles or superhero adventures. That was rare. Why doesn't DC embrace this and just let their characters be tools for storytelling? The idea that everything needs to knit together into a larger storyline is nice, but DC has never been able to pull that off as well as Marvel, at least not that I can recall, and the end result has been reboot after reboot after reboot. Finally, with regard to the hashtag Restore the Snyder Cut and Restore the Snyderverse movements, it's interesting to compare how that fan-driven movement compares to the Prime version, the fan letter mailing campaign to save Star Trek. B. Joe Trimble's first attempt to save Captain Kirk worked, but the second attempt to encourage NBC to give Trek a 4th season barely registered. TV execs were through dealing with Roddenberry's shenanigans, and they still refused to acknowledge the show's popularity with a core demographic with whom they had no first-hand understanding. Can the same be said for the Warner Brothers executives who are now telling fans to get over the Snyder Cut because the Warner Brothers train has left the station with the DCEU and Zack Snyder not invited to ride along? It will be interesting to hear how you handle this, says Mike. Well, thanks, Mike. Thanks for throwing me into the deep end. No, I'm just kidding. Here's what I find interesting, and I've said this before. Snyder got to make his trilogy, and if you think about it in those kind of terms, what I found it satisfying that he finished his trilogy. You know, all the things, there's many things obviously set up by Zack Snyder's Justice League, but I wonder, do we really need to see them? I mean, sure, it'd be fun to see them. I'd like to see them, but do we need to see them? I think, you know, by leaving off on that kind of a cliffhanger and setting up a number of different storylines that could go different places, we're going to actually see what happens to the Flash. And maybe, to me, what I would love to see is what happens with Batman when the Terminator goes a-hunting. I mean, those would also be Snyder Cut continuations, and I think we are, in fact, at least in The Flash, we're going to get some of that continuity, especially because Batman's going to be in that movie as well. So the Snyder Cut and the Snyderverse will live on to a certain extent, and it's lived on with Wonder Woman, it's lived on with Aquaman, with Jason Momoa and Aquaman doing Aquaman 2, so in a way, the Snyderverse has continued. Maybe it's not as closely knit as we might want it, but it's still out there. And it's not like they got rid of Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman or got rid of Aquaman or got rid of The Flash. And I think that's pretty damn cool. So, you know, I know everybody wants to see Zack Snyder come back and make this, but, you know, I think it's funny. No one's talking about whether Zack Snyder wants that. Would that be the best thing for him? And I think that's certainly a legitimate question to ask. And as I pointed out on this show, he's got a great thing going at Netflix. They like him. They really, really like him. So why not stay as a part of that? But, you know, we shall see. But ultimately, I think Mike has a good point. I kind of have really enjoyed the fact that when I watched Joker, I understood it was a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. You know, I watched something, I think it was the Golden Globes. I watched a clip the other day where Joaquin Phoenix somebody said, well, yeah, obviously this is a setup to the inevitable sequel. And Joaquin Phoenix was like, wait, what? Why are you asking me this kind of a question? I mean, why are we talking about a sequel when we're here to honor the film that I was just in? And I don't think, do we need a sequel to Joaquin Phoenix's Joker? Sure, you could tell a story, but would we gain very much from that? I mean, would it add to, say, those grand narratives? Would it be something that we have to see? Sure, would I like to see a sequel? Yeah, maybe. But do I need a sequel? I thought the Joker works as a standalone film really, really well. And as a matter of fact, maybe that's its power. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. But as far as what Hassan said about he could not care less about a Supergirl movie, a Blue Beetle movie, a Zatanna, or an alternate Superman movie, I would say the same thing is true about, I couldn't care less about RoboCop when it came out. I was like, the only reason I went and saw it was because Paul Verhoeven directed it. But when RoboCop was coming out, even though I knew people were involved, I was like, RoboCop? I mean, why don't you call, RoboPet? A robo-teacher, RoboCop? I had no interest. I went, opening night, I walked out of the theater like, that was fucking awesome. I loved RoboCop. I couldn't believe it. I was like, boy, was I stupid and prejudicial. So my whole thing was, if somebody makes a great Supergirl movie, a great Blue Beetle movie, or a great Zatanna movie, or even an alternate Superman movie, the movie might be great. You might not be looking forward to it at all. But that doesn't mean the story and the characters aren't going to be great and transcendent. You watch it and go, that kicked ass. So if somebody wants to make those movies, I always err on the side of maybe this will be awesome. It might suck. I've been disappointed certainly many times at the movies, but there's been a lot of times where I'm like, that was fucking, I had no expectations on that. I had no expectations of that at all. I'll tell you that there's there's a movie that Chris Stuckman reviewed the other day called The Empty Man that was actually directed by David Pryor. And over the last month, I think since The Empty Man made it to VOD, there's been a reassessment. I had no interest in seeing The Empty Man. None at all. But I saw it. And let me tell you, it was not what I thought it was going to be at all. And I have met David Pryor, and he was somebody who was a video documentarian. This was his first feature, and there's a really great interview with him about the making of The Empty Man. What a crazy story. It was it was a victim of the Fox Disney merger because it was a Fox film. But, I had no interest in seeing The Empty Man until I was watching some reviews. By the way, if you watch Chris Stuckman's review of The Empty Man, just watch it up to a point and then turn it off. You'll know when. But I was very surprised by The Empty Man. I'm like, oh. So, there are movies sometimes that can surprise you. The Empty Man was something that surprised me. And I think why decide? I mean, before a movie comes out, why decide that you have no interest in it? I mean, you don't know anything about it yet. Maybe I understand you might not care about a Supergirl movie or a Blue Beetle movie, or especially that version of Blue Beetle. Where's Mr. Cord? Zatanna, whatever. But why not wait if they're going to get made? Don't have any interest in them until you see the trailer. And if the trailer generates interest in you, then go see the movie. But until then, you don't have to wait. You don't have to worry about it. Don't think about it. But there's no reason to... How can you not be interested in something that hasn't been made yet? I mean, give it a chance. Give it a shot. Because why not? Might be great. Might be great. This one comes from Stubble McShave. Our friend Stubble says, Rob, as you know, I follow the production of Wheel of Time on Amazon quite closely. No, come on. For real? I am also interested in Amazon's production of Lord of the Rings. In my teens and early 20s, I was deep into the lore of Middle-earth and could answer just about any question about the world and its stories. During the last couple of decades, I've been interested in the world and the lore, but a lot of it has been lost from the vaults of my memory due to not focusing on it as much. Still, I've kept the enthusiasm for the stories of Middle-earth and have been looking forward to the upcoming series. With that in mind, I was dismayed to hear that there's been more drama in the production. The actor Tom Budge, who seemed to have been cast in a substantial role, has left the project. Although it had all the hallmarks of a typical diplomatic statement that's released when someone is let go from the production, it seemed like there was some animosity between the parties after the firing. Budge's official statement was, after recently seeing the first episode shot over the last year, Amazon has decided to go in another direction with the character I was portraying. He then also thanked the creative team. His statement smells a bit of frustration, at least to my ears. This in itself wouldn't raise that many eyebrows, but there's a trend there that I find troubling. And it's not so much on the acting side that I find the potential problems, but rather with the crew and the creators. The writer Brian Cogman, who is a very highly regarded writer, was let go before they were finished with the pilot. With him, a bunch of producers were also let go. The production also declined the assistance of John Howe. It's unclear to me whether he was hired and let go or merely rejected by the production. Also, the prominent Tolkien scholar Tom Shippey, who was serving as a consultant, exited the production unamicably. All of these exits from the show were attributed to creative differences, which doesn't really tell us anything. The thing that makes me most worried are the showrunners. They have barely anything on their IMDb record. They are two young guys who have a history with Bad Robot. They're only credited for Star Trek Beyond This, and from what I've heard, they contributed in minor ways to that movie. Other than that, they're completely uncredited. I know they have hired a lot of quality personnel in the crew, and that gives me some hope, but these trends of rejecting the help of John Howe and Tolkien scholar Tom Shippey makes me uneasy. I really hope the series hits it out of the park, but I can't help feel but a little worried. It doesn't help that there seems to have been a change in direction with the production at the time of Christopher Tolkien's death. He was always the one who was most protective of his father's work. As I said, I hope it's awesome, and I hope the showrunners deliver an epic story filled with amazing conflicts, fundamental betrayals, passionate love, and corrupt political intrigue. You know, all the things that make things epic. Anyway, I needed to get that off my chest. So, Rob, do you think that I should be worried, or is it just my imagination? What do you think? Thanks, Stubble McShave. Dude, I think, first of all, Lord of the Rings is probably going to go down in history as one of the most troubled television productions ever, for many of the reasons that you already cited, but the first and foremost reason being that it cost $250 million to buy the rights to a Lord of the Rings series. I mean, I would think that the people that spent that much money, Jeff Bezos or whomever, if the Lord of the Rings series doesn't make you have at least 2 or 3 orgasms during its running time each and every week, assuming it's a weekly show, it's going to be seen as a failure. Unless this show, and what I mean, I'm obviously joking, but if it's not the greatest television show ever made, certainly not the greatest fantasy show ever made, it's going to be considered a failure. And with that kind of pressure put on you, I'll tell you, I'll say it right out, that show doesn't have anybody that's steering that show that knows what's going on. There's a reason why the people that left. And I can't even imagine. I know they hired a new director to come in and do 4 more episodes. Maybe they'll redo the pilot. It's not so unusual. But this show has $250 million against it before they even shoot 1 frame of film. It's Jay Bayona, who directed the first 2 episodes, who I'm a huge fan of his. But again, a television show needs really strong writers, and you need somebody who really respects Tolkien. And the fact is, I think there's going to be an attitude, because there's too many cooks already with that kind of money. I don't think that you have nobody there with a vision. There's nobody there with a vision of what the show is supposed to be, which is, as we all know, death. Death. I mean, there's a reason why that show's been in production for as long as it has. Hey, maybe it'll turn out well. I don't have money. I don't have high hopes for it. And I think that's problematic. So, yeah, what can I say? Who knows? I hope it's better. This one comes from Sam. Hello, Rob, and my fellow imagination connoisseurs. I've been a long-time listener of Robservations. I find your enthusiasm, excitement, passion, and insight on movies and the movie-making industry captivating to listen to, and I've spent many an hour listening to your words of wisdom whilst working or relaxing in my downtime. My topic of conversation comes to you after witnessing the cultural phenomenon of Zack Snyder's Justice League become a reality we can all watch and enjoy. My God, that movie is so fucking metal! Never before have I seen horses used as flail-type weapons, water magic be used to drain the blood from someone's face, Olympian gods attack and hold off an invasion of aliens. So many of the visuals and story elements of this movie are astounding to behold, which makes this movie truly unique and even outside the circumstances of its being. After watching the movie and thinking about the possibilities of where the DCEU Snyderverse could have gone next, and still might go, never say never in the current streaming world we live in, it got me thinking about the parallels it had with a different comic book adaptation, Dredd, and another movie that was fucking metal and kicked a lot of ass. All the way back in the heady days of 2012, fans were clamoring and petitioning, myself being one of them, for a sequel to be made of the now cult classic movie that underperformed at the box office due to an inflated budget, the use of early prototype technology for the slow-mo, and a non-existent marketing campaign leading up to the movie's release inevitably caused it to fail financially. The movie did find success on home release, and because of these sales, it caused the movie to earn a profit overall, but the studio was not interested in risking any more money on a project that already failed in their eyes, so such a sequel never came to be. Fast forward to 2017, and the release of Whedon's Justice League and subsequent fan petitioning of #release the Snyder Cut. I had seen all this before as a now jaded fan of studio filmmaking from the Dredd days, and instantly dismissed the fan calls for Zack to release his movie, even though I really liked his movies in the DCEU, because who would stump up that kind of money for Zack to finish his vision? That's what I thought. Apparently, a lot can change in 8 years, and to my surprise and glee, the Snyder Cut was announced to be a reality in 2020. Now, 1 year later, it's here. The fandom has succeeded in bringing this project back from the dead, akin to Superman in the movie. But what about the future? Where does, if anywhere, the Snyderverse go now? I am in 2 minds. One, the avid Dredd fan who longed for a live-action sequel thinks we'll probably see a graphic novel of the Snyderverse and its continuity of Zack's vision, like Dredd Urban Warfare did, which continued the characters and the story of the 2021 movie and introduced the Dark Judges and Judge Death into that world. I think Zack's eye for action and visual storytelling would lend itself well to making a good graphic novel and be a fitting continuation. My second mind thinks that if HBO could approach Zack in the first place, hold talks with him and rebuild the broken bridges between him and the studio to bring him back on board and finish the Snyder Cut, well, anything is possible. If Zack wants to return to these characters, I honestly hope we get to see a 6-hour-long, back-to-back shot, metal Zack Snyder's Justice League 2 and 3 on HBO Max in a few years' time, but I have a feeling the reality will be a graphic novel continuation, if anything. Thanks for taking the time to read my message, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on whether WB or DC Comics would pursue creating a graphic novel with Zack to complete his full story arc with Darkseid's invasion, if no direct live-action path is taken, and how well does the Snyder Cut have to perform to get a continuation in DC's now multiverse? That comes from Sam. Well, Sam, great letter. Look, I think right now, the biggest problem, let's say that everybody decides, oh yeah, we want to continue Snyder's vision, and let's say the studio greenlit a movie. Let's say all those things happen. What's going to not happen is they're not going to spend $300 million on a movie right now. They can't. They can't spend that money. Unless, of course, I mean, if you could use, I could see the only way to do it, maybe, would be to do it for HBO Max and make heavily, lay heavily into the stagecraft technology that they created and they're using on The Mandalorian, which is now proliferating throughout the industry. Maybe they could get away with it by using that kind of technology, but it would still be very, very expensive. And I don't know if HBO Max, I mean, remember, it cost them $70 million to finish a movie that was already shot. So, you still have to shoot that movie. So let's take that $70 million and add on to, it costs $300 million already. And then, it'd be hugely expensive. I just don't see, without a theatrical component where they could guarantee $1 billion return, which they can't. I mean, maybe they could after the Snyder Cut, but like John Campy and I were saying, or John was saying, and I was saying, we have to wait and see what the numbers shake out to actually be. I mean, as the numbers go, will people come? I think it's actually when they get the numbers for a month that actually they're going to they're going to have a much better indication of the kind of success that this has. But we shall see. But I don't know. I think a comic book continuation could absolutely happen. I think it could. Why not? Why not? Omar94 writes in. Omar94 says, "Hi, Rob, moderators in the Post-Geek Singularity. You mentioned on the John Campia show how you have a huge affinity for space movies, as you two were talking about the trailer for Stowaway starring Anna Kendrick. This got me thinking about something I was reading about films in development hell. One problem in the film industry is how there are so many good scripts which don't get made in exchange for something less good. Or if a good script does get made, it can sometimes be meddled with, which makes it less good. This seems to be the case for this one space movie which just cannot seem to get made despite the original script's high praise. A writer called Jeff Vintar, whose original screenplay called Hardwired was rewritten into the Will Smith iRobot movie, wrote a script for a space movie called Spaceless. The script is unavailable online, but has developed a reputation for being very high quality. Several attempts at making a movie have failed, as the project has been in development hell for over 2 decades. Cary Fukunaga at one point was going to direct it, but did a rewrite of it, which led him to leave the project. Gore Verbinski is the latest filmmaker who's trying to make a film, and he says he wishes to stick to the original script. Andrew Kevin Walker, the screenwriter of Seven, has been offered the script by executives several times as a rewriting assignment, to which Walker would constantly tell them, "It doesn't need a rewrite, just make it." However, nothing happens. I'm not sure if a film based on the script will ever see the light of day, but it would be interesting to see. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, Omar, you know what? This is the first time I've heard of this. Spaceless. Now I want to read it. Hey, anybody out there in the industry who might watch this show, hook me up with a Spaceless script. I want to read it. Tell me. Thank you. Spaceless. Jeff Vintar, come on. I want it. Interesting. There's a lot of here's the problem. The problem, I would imagine that Spaceless was probably a great script, and everybody read it and thought this is a really good story. But then the old, will people go see it? I mean, at the end of the day, remember, there's lots of, I mean, there's probably one out of every 100 scripts, and that's what I always thought that the ratio is. For every 100 scripts, there's one decent script. A lot of people would say the ratio is much higher, but it's 1 in 100. So of 100 screenplays that are written, there's one that's good. Of that screenplay, the one that's good might be a great story. It might be a really well-written piece of material, but you read it and you're like, who's going to see this? How do we sell this? There's all these questions that rise up. And for the most part, from my experience, a lot of the executives, now that's not to say there aren't some great executives, because there are great executives. But in my experience, a lot of the executives just don't know whether a story is really good or not. They also don't know whether a script is really good or not either. They kind of do, but you'd be surprised. People read scripts, and if it's not their cup of tea, like right off the bat, they dismiss it. They don't know if it's good or bad. It's a very odd thing. So it might, there might be executives who just don't like science fiction that have read the script and like, nah, we're not going to greenlight this. To me, Andy Walker wrote, of course, the only script I ever said yes to in my life, which was Seven. I read that 30 years ago, and I was like, you got to make this movie. And they finally did 5 years later, and they didn't change it. They always everybody read Seven, and you're like, you can't end the movie with this head in the box. And David Fincher said, the only way I'm going to make this movie is if I can have the head in the box. And up until the end, when he made the movie, were they going to change it? But unfortunately, so many scripts like that don't get made. For whatever reason, some hang on. Like Speed Racer got made after 25 years. Actually, maybe not 25 years, more 15 years being developed. 20 years. And finally it got made. There's a lot of scripts. There's one particular project I was discussing with a producer the other day. Something that I've loved literally my whole life. And it's something that's been owned for a very, very long time by a studio. And I'm like, why hasn't this been made yet? Well, if you had somebody that had no connection to it or whatever, like, I don't understand why this should get made. Why is this good? I mean, it's funny to me. Like, look at A Handmaid's Tale. Margaret Atwood wrote that book. Came out. There's a version there's a movie. There's a feature film, The Handmaid's Tale, and yet somebody knew that this material is great, was able to bring it forth and make a TV series out of it. Terrific TV series, probably better than the movie, because it's gone a lot further in depth into the concept, and it gets made. So maybe one day it'll get made, but it's tough. This one comes from Swag Props. Cal. Hey, Rob, in September 2019, J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot signed a lucrative production deal, reportedly worth $250 million. No, it's like $500 million, with Warner Media encompassing movies, TV, video games, and more. With regards to movies, Abrams and Bad Robot will develop theatrical films for the divisions of Warner Brothers Picture Group, including Warner Brothers Pictures and New Line Cinema. Warner is home to many franchises, but I suspect Abrams has his eyes on one particular franchise owned by Warner that should have been a cash cow for the company, but it had been underperforming, and I'm not talking about the Scooby-Doo franchise, but rather DC. While under the auspices of Disney, when working on the Star Wars sequels, Abrams would have seen the respect commanded by Kevin Feige due to his success with the MCU, and I suspect Abrams would probably picture himself as the Feige for DC. After all, he'd written the script for Superman Flyby, which was abandoned, so DC probably would be something he'd want to finally check off on his list. DC had only as recently as 2018 steadied itself after Walter Hamada came on board as president, and even then, the films he produced had mixed success, with only Joker and Aquaman breaking the MCU benchmark of $1 billion at the box office, while Shazam, Birds of Prey, and Wonder Woman 84 underperformed. Hamada himself is currently under fire due to allegations by Ray Fisher. Perhaps Abrams sees an opportunity for himself to replace Hamada in the near future as the DC impresario. I don't know about that. J.J. Abrams is, regardless, I'm going to call him a filmmaker and a producer and a writer, but I don't think he wants to be a studio executive. And sure enough, Bad Robot is already attached to produce the Justice League Dark series for HBO Max, and in February of this year it was announced that Abrams and Bad Robot will be producing what is speculated to be a Superman film with an African-American actor taking up the mantle of the Man of Steel. There are undoubtedly many fans who are excited by this new cinematic representation of Superman, but there are also many fans who think it is yet another virtue-signaling, agenda-driven endeavor from J.J. Abrams. And while Ta-Nehisi Coates has been assigned to write the screenplay for the film, I'm sure J.J. would want to have a major say in the direction of the story. I wouldn't be surprised if he'll be announced as the film's director. Success with this film and with Justice League Dark would probably bring him closer to Hamada's job, if that's indeed what he's gunning for. And that's why I don't think Warner will give in to the fans' demands to restore the Snyderverse. I'm sure that lucrative deal JJ signed will guarantee him some exclusivity with the franchises he will be producing, and he'll be a major stumbling block to Zack Snyder restoring his vision for the DCEU. After all, JJ's not going to agree to develop a Superman film only for his version of the DC hero to be secondary in the DCEU to Snyder's, right? He would want his Superman, be it Calvin Ellis or Val Zod, to be the de facto Superman of the DCEU. Frankly speaking, though, while I like the Snyder Cut, I wouldn't be disappointed if he didn't come back to restore the Snyderverse to the DCEU. I'd be happy if Warner gave him one final deal and let him make a 4-hour nightmare film so we can see the conclusion to the post-apocalyptic storyline we saw in Batman v Superman and Zack Snyder's Justice League. At least we could be rest assured it will be fucking metal! Anyway, those are just my my uninformed thoughts, purely as a fan on the outside looking in. I'd be curious to know your thoughts on the matter. Sincerely yours, Cal, a.k.a. Swag Props. Well, Cal, great letter, and I agree with you. I think that J.J. Abrams is probably the biggest threat to Zack Snyder ever restoring the Snyderverse, because why would J.J. Abrams has no incentive. The one thing that Bad Robot has been looking for, the one thing that J.J. Abrams and cohorts at Bad Robot have been looking for, whether it's their backdoor company's secret hideout or whatever, is J.J. Abrams has been looking for a holistic franchise. And what I mean by that is they want to be involved in a franchise that has not just movies and television potential, but marketing potential for days. They hope they had that with Star Trek. They hope they had that with Star Wars. Now they're going to try and do that with the DCEU. I think it's a good bet. They're going to get their fingers in, and they're going to do everything they can to make the DCEU theirs. I mean, what's interesting, though, is you've already got the Berlanti CW verse. Then you've got all of the people that are making their own DC movies. So I think what J.J. Abrams is going to do, what he's going to have to do, is create his own continuity. There will be the J.J. verse. He tried to do it with Star Trek, failed. Star Wars, failed. And now he's going to try and do it with DC. They're going to try and do it streaming services like Justice League Dark, or I guess they'll only do it for HBO Max. Then they're going to make movies, and they're going to tie all this stuff together. They want merchandising rights, toy rights, video game rights, animation rights, all of it. They want to create their own empire that fuels their company, gives them lots of money for a long time. That's what they want to do. The problem is they just haven't been making product that's good enough to do that with yet. Star Trek didn't work. Star Wars didn't really work. Unfortunately, they failed to create characters that resonated. Look, for those people who like the sequel trilogy, I do not begrudge you. But I think it's been proven that ultimately the sequel trilogy was a dud. It ultimately didn't serve the classic characters, and it didn't create new characters that were really worth following. Now, they tried as hard as they could, but unfortunately, it was J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot that compromised Star Wars. I don't think it was Kathleen Kennedy. I ultimately don't. J.J. Abrams seemed like a good hire. J.J. Abrams is not talented enough to build the universes that he wants to build. At least he's gone through 2. Alex Kurtzman, if you want to take the Dark Universe over at Universal, I mean, wouldn't it be ironic if Jason Blum, beginning with Invisible Man and moving in and taking over, uses his business model where you're making movies for, say, $20 million or less, was able to reinstate the Monsterverse over at Universal and turn it into something that's amazing by making less than $20 million films, and they become franchise properties in their own right? How much did Invisible Man make on an $8 million budget? I mean, could work. You never know. No, I think that the J.J. Abrams has had great success in television. But again, I don't know. I mean, Warner Brothers, they got what they wanted, a $500 million deal, and now they have to produce. Let's see what they're going to make. Let's see what they're going to do. But I think you're right. I think the Snyderverse, the J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot is the biggest impediment. But also, I want to say, no one's going to greenlight a $300 million movie now without a theatrical component. Unless they can make $1 billion, $1.5 billion, $2 billion, no one's going to spend $300 million until we get back to a COVID-free world where our society can move forward and movie theaters are open to capacity around the world. We're not going to see it happen. Maybe on HBO Max again, maybe, but it really depends. We'll know. Like in a month, are they going to be happy with the subscription they received? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see where we're all at. I don't know, to be honest. I really don't know. That's a tough one. This one comes from CG. Dear Robert, ultimately, my family loved WandaVision. For us, it was like a weekly virtual trip to Disneyland, and the week in between, we were able to speculate about what the next Fantasyland ride would be like. I suppose that's why I wasn't too worried about the ending, because after a year in virtual quarantine, it was one of the few shared recreational experiences my entire family had together. We were thankful for the ride. I knew that Falcon and the Winter Soldier would be different, but wow, it was jarringly different for me. I had to watch it twice. Ultimately, I enjoyed it. But it felt like Marvel said, vacation is over, folks. We love your fan theories and your speculation, but now it's time for you to put your brain power to work on something that might have more real-world importance. They asked the question, how do superheroes pay the bills? They hinted at the answer. When the bank guy mentioned Sam's government contracts, but they never fully resolved that question, it was like they wanted us to figure it out. When I saw Bucky's elderly neighbor, I wondered about World War II connections. I was stunned to see Bucky had killed his son, seemingly unjustly, raising the question, how does Bucky confess such a terrible thing to such a nice man? And the entire episode was full of these sorts of questions. After the weeks-long speculation and fan theories about which Quicksilver is this, I couldn't help but notice the stark shift in conversation to these weighty questions of economics and personal loss. And I can't help but wonder if this might be Kevin Feige's not-so-subtle attempt to say, fans, you are super smart. Have fun with this stuff, but don't forget to put some of that brain power to the weightier matters of the world, too. What do you think? P.S. I agree that TV shows might ever be super revelatory in terms of plot, but I think that when we go to the movies, we'll be much richer for the experience. It's the difference between knowing the comic book character and going in blind. You just enjoy it more, understanding the background and what is at stake. CG, good letter, and I think you're right. First of all, it's great to have your family experiencing something after all this lockdown nonsense. I mean, I just want to go to a movie theater, and it was great. That was destination TV. It was fun to speculate. People were excited. When I watched Falcon the Winter Soldier, I'm like, I wanted a Tom Clancy-esque political thriller. I'm getting that. I love the idea that the villains, or the group that's been organized, is a group that during the blip believed in getting rid of international borders, which actually there was probably something to be said for that at the time. That's interesting to me. I really thought what they did, how they added to the lore of the Marvel Cinematic Universe during and after the blip was really interesting. And like you, I thought it was jarringly different, but also welcome and awesome. I mean, what's not to love about that? Very, very cool. I can't wait to hear more and see more. And I think that if this is the kind of entertainment we're going to continue to get from Marvel, I'm all in. I don't know what people are complaining about. Some people, I've noticed a definite anti-Marvel shift. I think there's been people that when WandaVision didn't have the revelations that they wanted, they feel they were let down somehow by the entire MCU, so they're not going to embrace it. But I'm excited. I really want to see it. David Kukol comes in, and David writes a letter, says, hi, Rob. As you are a comic book fan, I have to ask if you're familiar with the series from the early 2000s called Queen and Country, created and written by Greg Rucka. Yes, as a matter of fact, I can't reach it now, but I have it. I have it right on the shelf over there. This is not a superhero series, but a realistic spy drama with strong character arcs and some twists and turns that will knock you on your ass. Years ago, I was in the waiting room of my doctor's office reading an installment of the series, and I drew a sharp breath in reaction to an incident in the story. The other people in the room gave me very strange looks. The complete Queen and Country series is available in 4 omnibus volumes and even 3 prose novels that wrap up the story. Well, I didn't know about it, that it had prose novels. The series is one of my favorite things ever, and I even own 2 copies of each volume, one to reread and one to keep pristine. I rarely buy duplicates, and this shows how highly I value the series. I revisit it on occasion and can quote huge chunks of dialogue the way we as fans who grew up with the original Star Trek can quote episodes of that series. It is my understanding that a feature film version of Queen and Country has been in development hell for years. To be honest, I hope such a film is never made. Call me cynical, but I don't trust a major studio with it. I fear they'll step in, give their notes, miss the point, and fuck it up. You're not wrong to be worried about that. That is assuming a creative team can be found who are in tune with the source material. No, I prefer this property to remain pristine and unsullied. But what the hell do I know? If you haven't read this series, I urge you to check it out. Keep up the great work during these increasingly weird times. David Kukol. Well, David, as you know, I love your art. I love Queen and Country. I could see it being done as a streaming series. But I have to say, man, there are things that I thought. There was a book that came out. Let me get the So there was a series that came out called The Rook. And allow me to read from the Wikipedia page for The Rook. The Rook was an American television series that is loosely based on the novel of the same name by Daniel O'Malley and originally adapted by Stephanie Meyer. It was ordered direct-to-series at Starz in 2017. Meyer left the series due to creative differences as the first and second episodes were being filmed. It premiered on June 30th, 2019 in the United States on Starz, and on June 1st, 2019 in the United Kingdom. Starz confirmed that the series would not continue beyond the original 8-episode miniseries. I loved the Rook books. I thought, what a no-brainer. And I watched the series, and I'm like, oh, man. I'm like, how do you fuck this up? And it's so frustrating. So Queen and Country, great, like you said, great graphic novel. I've not read the prose novels. I didn't even know they were out. But great, great series. And I think, look, Ruck is a great writer, and that shows. And I would be curious because he's also a novelist. I think he would have written the novels, right? Definitely something to get. I'll have to go get those. But I think it's a great series. I think everybody should pick it up. Why not? This one comes from Cinema Gulp. Hi, Rob and the fellow members of the Post-Geek Singularity. This past summer, I wrote you a letter where I prefaced a question by saying it may be the most pointless question that's ever been asked. However, I felt compelled to preface this one in a similar fashion. In honor of the 4K Blu-ray Collector's Edition box set of the 4 Indiana Jones films, I posed to you a couple of questions. These questions have to do with the large chain of events that took place between the Last Crusade and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Events that are only breezed over in Crystal Skull but pose rather large issues. Some of these issues are bigger than others, but nonetheless all of them are valid in my mind. The first is a detail that if you look at facts, timeline, and the age of all involved, makes no sense. When the FBI agents interrogate Indy towards the beginning of the film, suspecting him of working for the Soviets, they make mention of him having fought in the war as an officer. When would this have happened, and when did he go to West Point or Annapolis in order to gain an officer ranking? Sure, he was clearly a man with multiple degrees in many fields of study already, but at what age did he decide to become a military officer? He was obviously in his 40s when we last saw him ride off into the sunset with Sala, Marcus, and his father. It's possible, due to the circumstances of World War II, that he was rushed through and placed in a position of power for some reason. But what reason would that be? Yes, to us as viewers, he's a hero and a swashbuckling adventurer, but why would the military care? What was his decision to leave his extravagant life of adventure and teaching in order to go fight more Nazis? If you look at all the Nazis he's killed throughout the first 3 films, he's more than done his duty. However, there are no details about when, how, or more importantly, why he did this between the two films. And since this offers nothing to the character or story of Crystal Skull, I guess it doesn't even matter. That's a really interesting idea. You know what, Cinema Gulp? I've never thought about that before. Here's what I would say about that particular issue. I'll bet you in a currently unfilmed and never to be filmed Indiana Jones adventure, maybe he was given a battlefield commission somehow. Maybe he was co-opted by the military, granted a officer title, and it was part of why he needed to go on the mission he needed to go on. We'll just never know. But I would believe that it would be something along those lines. That's why he did it. And like you said, he killed a lot of Nazis already, so it probably wasn't a big stretch. He knew about the American military. He already brought back the Ark of the Covenant for them. So maybe as a result of that, they just gave him an officer commission. Because why not? He already succeeded doing one of the missions for them, so maybe that's what happened. A bigger issue has irked me since the second I was sitting in the theater in the summer of 2008 watching Crystal Skull as we enter Dr. Jones's home, and a long panning shot reveals framed portraits of Marcus Brody and Henry Jones, who we all know as Indy's father. From there, Indy makes mention of the death of both men to Jim Broadbent's Dean Charles Stafforth. So why does this irk me? Sure, Marcus and Henry would have been pretty old by that point in time, but there is the detail they missed. Let's go back to Last Crusade for a moment. We all know that Walter Donovan's demonic plan was to retrieve the Holy Grail to gain eternal life while also bringing pure dominance to the Nazi order. Donovan quoted the Bible as the Grail giving eternal life to those who drink from it. After allowing Elsa to choose the cup she believes is the real Grail, Donovan toasts to eternal life and takes a gulp. However, since she chose the wrong cup, perhaps intentionally, he aged out the remaining years of his life in a pretty awesome yet horrific fashion. The events that took place moments before this had Donovan shooting Henry Jones in the stomach, which caused Indy to venture into the temple to retrieve the Grail in order to hopefully save his father. Once locating the correct wooden Grail cup, Indy filled it with holy water and rushed it out to his father in hopes it would save his life. Indy splashed the holy water from the cut into his father's fatal wounds before helping him drink directly from the cup itself. So my question, if this action of drinking from the cup of Christ would give one eternal life, then why was Henry Jones dead in the Crystal Skull? We know how it works based on watching the water from the cup close up and cure Henry's fatal gunshot wounds. His skin even closed up. So how did Henry Jones die? Did he get hit by a bus? It sure didn't seem that way based on how Indy glossed over the events of his death. If the water from the cup of Christ gives eternal life, then why was Sean Connery's Henry Jones dead? How did he die? There must have been a huge event in Indy's life knowing that his father now couldn't die. It's clearly a detail they just forgot about, or am I just not seeing? I'm sure that the Post-Geek Singularity will help me with this. Like I said, Rob, pointless questions, but maybe I'm just bored with life. Any thoughts? I'd love to hear what the PGS thinks. I'm sure I'll be called back to task rather quickly, but these two issues always bothered me. As always, Rob, keep up the great work. Cinema Gulp will always be a loyal member. P.S. Please check out the latest episode of Binge Drinking, where we discuss in spoilers WandaVision with none other than the Post-Geek Singularity's own Black Phillip Alvarez as our guest. Let me put that link in the main chat. There you go. I got one for you. Cinema Gulp. In order to have everlasting life from the cup of Christ, you have to keep drinking from it. One drink isn't enough. That's what I would say. Like Henry Jones took the drink, he was already dying. It healed him, but that was it. In order to or to have eternal life, you have to keep drinking from the cup of Christ, I guess. I don't know if that's the case, but that's what I would imagine. You have to keep drinking from it. That's why holding on to that grail is so important. But again, I don't know if that's canonical or not. Don't know. Is that canonical? Is it not canonical? David Miller writes in. David Miller says, "Hello, Rob. You recently said something to the effect of handing the Star Trek franchise to the fans may not be the best idea. If you want to see what Star Trek might look like if given over to a fan, I suggest you look no further than John Byrne's photo novellas. Now, full disclosure, I've been a huge fan of John Byrne's work for some time, but his Fumetti books for IDW started out strong and quickly took on the feel of a really good fan film. Why do I say this? Well, the stories soon became very insular, revisiting old episodes and old characters instead of branching out to more stories, just as Star Trek Continues seemed to do on YouTube. Maybe we were being exposed to the stories that Byrne wanted to tell since he was a kid. Maybe the availability of original series images made these kinds of stories necessary. Maybe CBS dictated parameters that Byrne had to stay in. Who knows? All we know is that I feel the potential of the Fumetti books was not realized. What were some of the examples of what I disliked? First off, the ease Mirror Kirk had breaching the dimensional plane and appearing on the Enterprise when it was expressly explained that the density between the two universes was increasing where it was impossible to make the jump between universes. I don't think it should be super easy to jump between universes, and one shouldn't approach the Mirror universe if you don't have a story that improves upon the previous tale. And the most egregious error was Harry Mudd using alien technology to change his body to a perfect copy of Kirk's with Mudd's mind in it. I couldn't find it as anything but silly, and pulling in Captain Tracy as the villain, that seemed so random, and I just couldn't see him not being in a space gulag for years to come. It's things like this that make the photonovellas a somewhat failed experiment and feel like a fan production. Well, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy the Snyder Cut. Best, David Miller. What David's talking about is John Byrne created photonovels. Okay, so pre-VHS, for those of you who don't know, photonovels like this one for Buck Rogers in the 25th century. They did one for Lord of the Rings. They did a photonovel for Hair. I have it. These were big deals. The granddaddy of photonovels were the Star Trek photonovels. They did 12 Star Trek photonovels. And what they were is they just take the episodes and they turn them into comic book form. So you have still frames of the episodes. This one's, because it's TV and it's low res, it's NTSC, the resolution is not good, unlike a movie. So this takes every shot that was in like an episode, in this case it's the theatrical feature, and it turns it into like comic book form. And when I was a kid in the 70s, these were huge to get these. These were like the best. I love them. So what John Byrne did was he took episodes of Star Trek and he did the same thing. He took still frames and created all new stories. And pretty cool experiment. But he did it so it's in comic form, but instead of drawing everything, he just used pictures from all the different episodes. Now, observant viewers notice that, oh, wait a minute, he's not just using one episode, he's mixing and matching, and sometimes the uniforms were a little bit different. So he just took which shots were the best, which were best for him. And I think that it was cool. I liked him, but like David Miller pointed out, that like when he's bringing Harry Mudd back, you can bring Harry Mudd back, you can show having people's minds swapped, and then suddenly you're using clips of Kirk that's really Harry Mudd, and since you're using all the stills from the episode, you've got high resolution versions of them, you're mixing and matching and things, and I think that they were very limited. And what David's asking is, why didn't they do more original stories? Well, to do original stories, you would have had to create material that doesn't exist, which he maybe could have done, but I think it was easier to do what he did. So yes, so that's why he did that, which I think is pretty cool. This is I have a very long letter that I will read tomorrow, but I'll read it later. Let's see what you guys are saying. What are you saying today? I don't know because I haven't looked yet. Let's see what you're saying. Let's find out. I don't even know. I haven't even delved into this today, so I don't know who's here. Let's look into it together. I think I said Nick Parrish. Yeah, that's from yesterday. So here we go. Dakota. Dakota says, what are your thoughts on the 1999 cult classic movie Ravenous? I liked Ravenous. I thought it was good. I personally love the dark humor in it, and they will eventually put the Friss Order... What is that? The Friss Order what? I'm not sure what you got going on there. Edition of it, the uncut edition of it out on Blu-ray. Maybe they will. I liked Ravenous. It's a good bloody adventure yarn. I liked it a lot. a lot of people haven't seen it. But if you haven't seen Ravenous, check it out. It's good. Willow says, I'm with you on being on Team Godzilla. I'm going to be very unhappy if he gets jobbed. Well, Willow, once again, you and I, certainly we park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. Look, King Kong is a monster that got, first of all, taken out by biplanes and then by jets. A couple of planes took him out. How many planes has Godzilla destroyed? Godzilla's been to space. How many giant monsters has Godzilla fought in his life? Versions of Godzilla were on Ultraman. Godzilla has there ever been a Godzilla cartoon series with a theme song? Why, yes. How about a Kong series with a theme song? I don't think so. Team Godzilla all the way. And I hope he doesn't get jobbed. Just like you said, Willow. Damn it. S-Beam sends in a super chat. S-Beam, those action figures are choice. I can't wait. I want one. I want to put it right back here. Have it in a place of honor the whole time. 200 Watt Studio sends in a super chat and says, got an email about the WB Shop closeout sale. Oh, man. What can you do? But you know what? They boned me on Lord of the Rings on my collector's set. If it wasn't for Throg, I'd be boned. Ray Valero sends in a super chat. Thanks, Ray Valero. Appreciate that. Sheriff Carl says, dude, I watched Gattaca last night. It was pretty baked, but it occurred to me that Bowfinger is basically the same movie. Am I just high? Yes, I mean, I am, but do you see it? Speaking of getting high, Falcons flying tonight, motherfuckers. Let's see. You know what? What did I just do with it? Speaking of Gattaca, Gattaca Steelbook, man, in my beautiful sleeve that I put these in. Gattaca 4K Steelbook this week. Ooh, that's a special feature. Spoiler alert for Let's Get Physical Media. Spoiler alert. Yes, Gattaca will be featured on Let's Get Physical Media. I love Gattaca. I think Gattaca's great. I love it. It makes me sad, but I love it. And Gore Vidal's in it, which is amazing. I don't know about Bowfinger being the same movie. You know what? I'd have to see Bowfinger, but I don't doubt it that they might have some similarities. I love the fact that people can now say they're honest about getting baked because it's legal, so you can say it. So, Sheriff Carl, you know what? I would have come over and watched Gattaca with you, but I'm not in the P&W. Jeff Yerke's here. Hello, Jeff. How's the wife? Oh, you didn't say and Mrs. Yerke. I hope you're not in a fight. Hi, Rob. Just a quick note. I took a colossally bad fall on Tuesday and have damaged my spine. What? No surgery, thank God, but a world of pain. Mrs. Y has been pulling superhero duty, caring for me. Oh, my God. She truly is the best. Anyway, keep a good thought, the Yerk Man. Well, we're all going to keep a good thought, and I can't believe I disparaged the fact that you didn't add your wife's name when, in fact, you did. Jeff, we're all pulling for you. Spinal injuries are not to be trifled with, so do what they tell you to do and feel better. Feel better. Gerard Leon sends in a tip. And Gerard Leon says, hey there, my favorite movie knowledge robber baron. Random 90s cable TV network question. Have you ever seen, do you remember, ahead of its time, the sex comedy show Dream On HBO? Whatever happened to all the seasons? 1 and 2 are the only ones available. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun. Martin Tupper's my spirit animal. I loved Dream On. I love Dream On. I could not get enough of Dream On. And let me tell you something about Dream On. I have a couple of stories about Dream On. And just I want to make sure that I'll tell you a funny story about Dream On. So I at one point I was what was called a predator for NBC. I was a producer editor. I helped conceive of and then make promos for their shows. And it was after I made over 100 Olympic spots for the complete Olympics in 2000, the Sydney Olympics. I was kicked upstairs and I worked on their prime time launch campaigns. And one of the campaigns I worked on was a thing called It's Back to Work. And what we did was we went and shot on all the NBC primetime shows like The West Wing and Will and Grace and a lot of the big shows. We went and shot behind the scenes material with all the actors and the crew, but mostly the actors getting ready for work. Third Rock from the Sun, all that stuff. So one of the people that I was shooting was Wendy Malick. And I think we were in like the makeup trailer, and Wendy Malick, of course, was Martin Tupper's ex-wife, Judith. And when I loved Dream On so much, and I loved Wendy Malick. And she had some trepidation for how we were shooting. Like, because it was behind the scenes, she wanted to make sure she looked good and all that, as actors do. And I assured her, I said, listen, I took her aside. I said, listen, just so you know, there's no way that I would make Martin Tupper's ex-wife look bad. And she actually laughed, and she goes, because you said that, I trust you now. Which I thought was pretty funny. But did I love that. And I have to say that I love, but I don't know. It's really funny that only seasons 1 and 2 are available. I wonder if maybe it has something to do with the credits of maybe the old films or something. That's a really good question. Why aren't those seasons? I didn't know that. That's really interesting. And not obviously not something that that you want to. I don't know. That's really weird. But I'll tell you something else about Dream On. Guess who's in Tango Shalom? My film Tango Shalom, or our film Tango Shalom. That's right, Renee Taylor. And who is Renee Taylor to Dream On fans? Martin Tupper's mother. Renee Taylor, co-star of Tango Shalom, is Martin Tupper's mother. So there's my other story. I don't know how funny it is, but Gerard, any Dream On fan is a fan of mine, a friend of mine. We park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. Jack Frost, hello Jack. Part 1. I'm almost done with my TNG rewatch. I recently watched the episode Lower Decks, and wow, that is a powerful episode. Great work by the production to bring back the Bajoran cadet Sito Jaxa and giving her an incredible arc. I know. And you watch that episode and you're like, couldn't Lower Decks, the animated series, be anything like that? Which makes me confused why that episode was the springboard for the comedic animated show. There's some levity, but most of the episode is about how life as a starship crew is complicated. Hey, I agree. I think Lower Decks is one of Next Generation's finest hours. It's a great episode. And for them to be evocative of that episode and not deliver, I understand what it's almost the exact opposite. And it really bothered me. Jack goes on to say, technically, anyone could create any type of genre TV from anything. I could find a way to make a slapstick comedy from Seven. It's come up twice in today's show. I grew up with Star Trek like many people here. My mom introduced me via TNG. Maybe in a sadistic way, I just want CBS Viacom to just pump the Star Trek IP until it's completely dry and dead. Just bury it and allow people to enjoy the historical records. Yes, that is a Galaxy Quest reference. Jack goes on. I may be out of your videos too long, but have you been watching Red Letter Media's Star Trek The Next Generation videos? Cheers, good fortune, and health to you and your family. Well, Jack, first of all, thanks for supporting the channel. Yes, I have been watching Red Letter Media. They're going on. I saw their first season video. I really like Red Letter Media a lot. I really like those guys. But look, I think your point's well taken. You could turn anything into slapstick. And I agree with you. And I think that's the real problem. I read once that once a genre gets to parody, that it's over, sort of. And I think that Star Trek is now... Star Trek is a genre unto itself. And I think, as I have disliked what they've done to Star Trek intensely since 2009. And while Lower Decks was, a lot of people like it, to me, it's like, why dilute the Star Trek brand further than it's already been diluted in the last 12 years? I mean, maybe Strange New Worlds will be good. I don't think it will, based on Akiva Goldsman's, if it's his thing, based on his treatment of science fiction. I don't have much hope. But I agree. I mean, dude, now I want to see a slapstick version of Seven. What would that look like? S. Beam says, "Hi, Rob. Hope your day is going well. This pertains to the 1/6 scale figure I'm making of you. One reason it's taking so long is because I'm including a director's chair for both of you. I just wish I had more time to work on it. Job, single dad stuff, laugh out loud. Well, S-Beam, it doesn't matter how long it takes. We will wait. But when I get it, I will put it in a place on the set where it will always be available. Maybe I'll have the Rob hot toy figure hanging out with Vampirella back there, as he should. But don't take your time. There's no rush. I mean, I love seeing those mock-ups that you sent the pictures out of. That leather jacket you made is with the hoodie is dope. It looks great. Very cool. Santez Henderson says, if Justice League is a success, which it is, why not just continue? Looks like Snyder took the criticism to heart and actually got better at it. Okay, you know what I think's the problem? Remember, it was extraordinarily expensive to make that movie. And it would be extraordinarily expensive to do another one. And right now, I just don't think the studios could even greenlight a movie in that budget level without having all the studios, all the movie theaters open to full capacity. I just don't think it can be done. But we'll see, unless there's a way to do it for HBO Max. The question is, would Snyder, I have to point out, Netflix is being very nice to our boy, Zach. And unless, I mean, right now he's in a great position if Warner Brothers feels the Snyder Cut is really doing well for them. And I'd be curious to see, how it pans out over a month. What do those numbers look like? And if it's really successful, maybe they'll figure out a way. But also the actors, could you get all those actors back? At this point, would Ray Fisher work with Warner Brothers again? Ezra Miller's doing his Flash movie. They're doing Wonder Woman 3 already and Aquaman 2. So how could that work? I don't know. Coloco says, "Yo, Rob, I love film just as much as video games. My dream film based on a game would be The Legend of Zelda in a Lord of the Rings style." Oh, dude, I'd be so there for that. How big a fan of you are video games, and is there one you would like to be seen brought to the screen? Well, I have to tell you, Legends of Zelda is a good one. I have to say, though, when I first played Uncharted 1, the first Uncharted game, I love video games. As a matter of fact, one of our viewers might have hooked me up with a PlayStation 5. Now, I am neither confirming nor denying that, but we shall see. But I like video games. I really do. I love video games. I've always loved video games. But when I played Uncharted the first time, that was the first time I ever played a video game from start to finish, beginning to end in one day. It took me over 13 hours to do it, but I was so enamored of that game because for the very first time, I felt like I was playing a movie. The voice acting, the environments, the gameplay, I was completely invested. I couldn't stop playing. And now we're getting an Uncharted movie, even though the problem with the Uncharted movie is I feel like it, it's kind of Uncharted was the bastard child of Tomb Raider and Raiders, sort of. So it wasn't exactly the most original thing in the world, but I have to tell you, the games, I was obsessed with Capcom's Onimusha and Devil May Cry when they first came out and all the different iterations. I mean, I don't know how you'd make an Onimusha game or even a Devil May Cry game, because it's not exactly, there's not a whole lot of plot there. I mean, as the games have moved forward, they've gotten better. But, I mean, I'd be so there for an Onimusha or Devil May Cry game. I mean, I would love that. But I think, like you said, watching a Zelda game in LOTR style, that'd be great. I'd love that. I'd love to see. I kind of like. I mean, the Final Fantasy Spirits Within movie was not obviously great, but I would love to see like an epic Final Fantasy game or something like that. Or movie. I do want to see Halo or Mass Effect or any of these giant space opera films. But yeah, I would love to make some haunting existential Ico movie, or In the Shadow of Colossus. I don't know if anybody would be there for that, but I would be. Tamork, my friend, how are you? All the way up in Norway. How are you doing? How are things? Hope things are good. Thanks for the super chat. My friend the T-Man, he came down and saw, back in 2012, saw Skyfall with me. Him and his lovely, wife, lady. Can I say that now? Wife, now ex-wife? Ex? But she's great. Still love her too. Sorry. I can still love her, right? I know you guys. It's all good. But good to see you. Thanks for the super chat. I appreciate it. Brendan Sheehy says, Rob, when I was a young chap, I ate up Roger Moore Bonds with relish. I put mustard and ketchup on them too. I was flipping the channels as a kid and stumbled across my beloved Roger 15 minutes in, and I was horrified by how dull this Bond adventure was. Turns out I was watching Bed and Breakfast from 1992. Yep, that was post-Bond. Roger Moore left the franchise in 85 with A View to a Kill. So there you go. That's funny, though. How'd you not know? The T-Man says, Yo, I don't want lunch at Kookaroo, but please tell me who is the ultimate, who would have imagined Batman? Who's the ultimate Batman? You don't want lunch at Kookaroo. That's very funny. Who would have imagined Batman? Who would I have imagined as Batman? I mean, you know what? Like, look, I would love it if Clint Eastwood had done The Dark Knight Returns in the 80s. That's what I mean. I think I'm not the only person who wanted that. I think a lot of people thought about that. I mean, Clint Eastwood as an aging Batman and bring him to do The Dark Knight Returns. That's what I want to see. That was my dream project. Claudius writes in. Claudius, not Maximus, but Claudius. Claudius, the one of sane mind. Claudius says, in reference to Cinema Gulp's question about how Indy would be commissioned, the urgent need for experts resulted in 104,000 civilians becoming officers in the Army during 1942 alone through direct commissioning. Ba-boom! Ba-boom, Claudius with the truth. So Cinema Gulp, there you go. See, I was kind of right. I didn't know the actual reality behind it. By the way, Claudius would be in the know. He works for our government in a branch of the military. So that is I didn't know that. 104,000 people becoming officers during 1942 alone. That makes sense. Yeah. Last Event sends in a super chat and says, I heard some of your comments on the John Campy show, how the Snyder Cut might be the end of the Snyderverse, but we know how much you loved it and want more of it. Tweet it, Rob. #restore the Snyderverse. See, the thing is, here's the thing. I'm thinking, as I was thinking about the Snyder Cut from the very beginning, I'm thinking about it from a filmmaking perspective, and I'm also thinking about it from a Zack Snyder perspective. First of all, Zack Snyder has a really hot deal right now, good thing going with Netflix, and I want to see where that goes. And so if Warner Brothers comes back to him, I'd be down with the restore the Snyderverse. But what I don't want is, we got the Snyder Cut, and now people want more. They're not satisfied. I want to see people supporting #can't wait for Army of the Dead. Where's that kind of support? Give Zack Snyder, if you want to support a Snyderverse, the best way to do it is not to hashtag it. It's to watch the Snyder Cut of Justice League and get as many people to as you want. And then put in support Army of the Dead. Because that's Zack Snyder's next thing. What we want is to support Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder's vision. Support Zack. So that's what I would say. I can't in good conscience say #restore the Snyderverse, because I think right now that'll be counterproductive. Start that campaign in a month if HBO Max has great numbers and say the Snyder Cut was a smashing success. And they're not going to know that yet. Like I said on the John Campea show, the Snyder Cut's it's twice as long as something like Wonder Woman. So Wonder Woman can get 2 times the views that than the Snyderverse can, or Zack Snyder's Justice League. So let's wait a month. If the numbers are resoundingly show that the Zack Snyder's Justice League is a huge hit, then start the campaign. But now is too premature. Now is the time when you support Army of the Dead, because you make Warner Brothers realize Netflix is going to sign a deal with Zack Snyder and we'll never be able to get it back. And if it's a big success, well then, right now I want to see Ben Affleck make his Batman Terminator movie. Kaz Graphics says, our cheesemonger, the official cheesemonger of this channel, yes, we have one. And that is Kaz Graphics, who, by the way, his graphics company, VN Graphics. I love this glass so much. I just like the weight of it. Says the team, man, Teamwork. I think it's so funny. Teamwork. 5-minute review of the amazing To Live and Die in LA. Oh my God. Well, hang on. Kaz Graphics says that the Suicide Squad trailer drops tomorrow. Can't wait for that. I watched that behind the scenes video. Kaz, I can't. That movie looks like it's going to be bonkers in the very best way. I cannot wait. Cannot wait. So, says a 5-minute review of the amazing To Live and Die in LA. 5-minute review. Well, okay. Many of you might know that William Friedkin, who directed The Exorcist, did an adaptation of Gerald Pedovich's book To Live and Die in LA about counterfeiters. That the Secret Service is on the trail of counterfeiters in LA, and the movie came out in October of 1985. I love To Live and Die in LA. It was peak 80s. It was one of the most stylish movies that William Friedkin ever made. The editorial style was definitely influenced by MTV. Robbie Mueller's cinematography was amazing. The cast for To Live and Die in LA is great. First of all, the late, great Steve James is in it, and anything Steve James is in. And Steve James, like, in that movie, he has, I don't know if you know Steve James. He's a black actor who's in, like, American Ninja with Michael Dudikoff. And Steve James had a great voice. I love Steve James. Steve James rocks a perfectly maintained fro that's just long enough. It's not too long, but it borderlines on that. I love Steve James. He's in it. First of all, that's all you need to know. You should love the movie there just because of that. William Peterson, his first starring role. That's right, CSI William Peterson. Will Graham, Manhunter. He plays Richard Chance, Secret Service agent, going after Rick Masters, played by Willem Dafoe. They have it's one of the most homoerotically charged films you'll ever see, but it won't matter to you even if you're a straight dude, because it's fucking great. And it's got a Wang Chung score. And you've got Daphne from Frasier in it. And I'm telling you, and it's a cat and mouse game between Richard Chance and Richard Chance's partner gets killed. Jimmy Hart gets killed, so Richard Chance is out for blood. He teams up with John Pankow, who's kind of a punk, who plays John Vukovich. And you got Darlene Flugel from Battle Beyond the Stars in it. I mean, maybe this isn't 5 minutes, but all I can say is if you want a high-octane cop thriller that's set not in Beverly Hills or not in the Hollywood Hills, it's set in the flatlands of L.A., the industrial part of L.A., San Pedro to downtown. I'm telling you, To Live and Die in L.A., if you've never seen To Live and Die in L.A., and you love cop thrillers, do yourself a favor and watch it, because it is awesome. So there you go. I hope that's good. Brendan Shee, he says, Rob, given Marvel's penchant for subverting expectations, my outlandish theory is that Marvel are grooming Wyatt Russell to take over the Cap role for a couple of years. They're introducing him in an interesting way, avoiding the tired old tropes of an origin story. Brendan, I don't agree. I think Falcon is going to become the new Captain America, and we shall see if that's the case. But Wyatt Russell can play U.S. agent and be part of the MCU, but that's what I think is going to happen. I think Falcon's going to become the new Captain America. He's going to be flying as well, and it's going to be awesome. And they're going to make a hot toy of him, and I will pre-order that hot toy. Simon says, Ode to Shatner. Captain's Log, Stardate 9529.1. This is the final cruise of the Starship Enterprise under my command. This ship, I won't do that. Ode to Shatner, Captain's Log, Stardate 9529.1. This is the final cruise of the Starship Enterprise under my command. This ship and her history will shortly become the care of a new generation. To them and their posterity, we will commit our future. They will continue the voyages we have begun and journey to all of the undiscovered countries, boldly going where no one has gone before. Happy belated birthday to my favorite starship captain, William Shatner. Nice callback. That was the end of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, which is great. Claudius says, Indy during World War II. Museum directors, curators, art historians, artists, architects, librarians, and educators, the monuments men and women formed a unit of Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives, MFAA section during World War II. Check out the movie. Well, there you go. Indy was a monuments man. I love that movie, by the way. Indy was a monuments man. That makes sense. That makes total sense. I'll buy into that. I will buy into that 100%. I'm in. Count me in. Brandon Sheehy says 7. Now it's been brought up a third time. Yeah, but the V, you have to make the V the number 7. Stub McShave says, do you know what day it is today? It's the official Tolkien Reading Day. Finally, a National Day celebration that I can get behind. I did not know that today is Tolkien Reading Day. See, you learn something on this show new all the time. That's let me put that. I'm going to put that right here in the chat. Tolkien Reading Day. Here you go. Tolkien Reading Day. Hey, I didn't know that, Stubble. That's interesting. I didn't know there was a Tolkien Reading Day. Claudius says, last one on Indy during World War II. T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, was an archaeologist and a British intelligence officer. Cheers. Well, I think Cinema Gulp, if you're watching today, you have to love the fact that Claudius, a real I don't know if are you an officer, Claudius? I think you are, right? I don't know. I'm not for sure. I can't say. I don't want to blow his cover. But Claudius is in a position to know. Let me just say that. And what a great answer to Cinema Gulp's query. How was Indiana Jones an officer during World War II? Well, now we have, I think, this is why the Burnettwork and this specific show, Robservations, has a great audience, because you imagination connoisseurs, and I should point out that Claudius, even though he suffered some kind of a strange psychotic break, Claudius and Maximus are now Gollum and Schmeagol. Claude himself, the regular Claude, he's the man. He knows of what he speaks. So that's good. Captain Beanzino says, Metal Gear will kick ass. Snake Plissken, come on, man. Yeah, I would love to see a Metal Gear movie. Who wouldn't like to see a Metal Gear Solid movie? I'd love to see Solid Snake on the big screen. Why not? But could they do it? Are they going to make it good? Brandon Shee says, speaking of Roger Moore, I always find it jarring at the end of A View to a Kill that Roger hooks up with Tracy. I didn't think he was even attracted to her during the movie. I bet he thought about his wild romp with Grace Jones while betting Vanilla Tracy. Can you imagine? James Bond sleeps with Grace Jones during A View to a Kill. That would have been a great night. I'd be slave to that rhythm, let me tell you. By the way, for those who might, get upset, I mentioned slave to the rhythm not because Grace Jones is black, but because ZTT, Slave to the Rhythm, Grace Jones, produced by Trevor Horn. That's what I'm talking about. I have that CD right over there, and many remixes. I knew somebody would. I have to nip that in the bud because someone will get mad. But I'm a big Grace Jones fan. Night clubbing. And if you like Grace Jones, how cool is it they use Liver Tango? You've seen that face before during Roman Polanski's movie Frantic. I know, everyone's like, what are you talking about, Rob? It's just a Grace Jones thing. I love Grace Jones. Tmork T-Man says, you may like me and my ex, but I will be your Joker. I love raw feelings and ripped cards. Did you cry when Optimus Prime died? Did I cry when Optimus Prime? I did not. You mean during the Transformers the movie? I didn't die. I didn't cry. I did not cry. I admit it. Roger Green says, "Hey Rob, these are funny. These are fun. Are you drinking the Norway nectar tonight? Is that what it is?" Jack Frost says, "Correction. Sorry, Galaxy Quest superfans. Historical documents. Thinking of how culture changes every generation for good." Wait a minute. That's not what I was reading. I didn't finish reading what Roger Green said. Grind. Roger says, "Hey Rob, TNG brought me to Shakespeare." Wow, this is a very nice super chat you sent to me. Thank you very much. Hey, my computer is crazy here. Let me start this again. Roger Grind. "Hey Rob, TNG brought me to Shakespeare. My favorite movie adaptation is the 96 Hamlet. I have the Blu-ray. I own a Shakespeare collective work from 1864. I love that book. Interesting to imagine how many people read and enjoyed that book. You know what, Roger? I have right over there, when my grandfather died, he was born in 1910, and I think it's from the 20s. I have a collected Shakespeare volume as well that I love. It's embossed. You know what? If I remember, I'll bring it on the show. I love the fact that TNG brought you to Shakespeare. Some people say it was Star Trek 6, but that's so great that TNG brought you to Shakespeare. I love that. And I love that you have a book. I love that you have a book from 1864. That is something to cherish. And also, the 96 Hamlet, I have 96 Hamlet. I have that on Blu-ray, and it came in a media book, the domestic one. I love the 96 Hamlet. I love it. I think it's great. Now let me get back to Jack Frost. Correction. Sorry. Galaxy Quest superfans, historical documents, thinking about how culture changes every generation for good, bad, and every way in between. Have you seen the Elliot Gould, Candice Bergen movie, Getting Straight from 1970? I have not. I have not seen that film. But I do love Elliot Gould, and I do love Candice Bergen. But I have never seen that movie. That clearly I have a hole in my cinematic education now that I must fill. Nick Parrish says, "What's up, Rob? So it's almost here. We're days away from D-Day for movie theaters. Godzilla and Kong not only have to save a fictional Earth, but also the real-world box office. Rob, if Kong and Godzilla succeed, will we see shifts up for big films?" You know what? I think Kong and Godzilla will succeed, bolstering the box office, but it's not enough to release a lot of these tentpole films. I mean, that's why you see littler movies like Spiral. It depends. I mean, if the numbers go down, we'll see, but I think it really depends on us. It really depends on us. Team Godzilla, by the way. 100%. Team Godzilla. Simon sends in a tip and says, "It would be really nice if Star Trek Discovery would be able to pay an homage in an episode to Captain Kirk. After all, Captain Kirk contributed a lot to build the Federation." Yes, but Star Trek Discovery, Captain Kirk is not a captain yet, so they don't know who he is. Oh, you mean, you know what? You're right, because they're in the 32nd century. Yeah, they could. But, if you think about it, how many people do we remember from 1,000 years ago? I mean, it'd be nice if they did that. I don't know if we'll see it, but it'd be nice if they did. I could see that. But I don't know about him building the Federation, because the Federation was already there. He contributed to the Federation. He saved the world multiple times over. But, yeah. Lastovan says, "What did you think of Ray Fisher's performance in Justice League? I found him to be good, but other reviewers found it to be CW show quality." No, I thought he was very good. I thought he was a little one note, but I liked his performance a lot. I thought he was great as Cyborg because he was. I mean, think about what he was playing, a newly minted Cyborg. He wasn't exactly totally self-actualized. We saw him getting to use his powers. In a way, he was mirroring Henry Cavill learning about his powers in Man of Steel, which I thought was pretty good. Stub McShave says, trivia question, what movie is Clint Eastwood called a punk by his co-star? I've mentioned the movie several times on previous shows. Trivia, that he gets called a punk. I don't know. Outlaw Josie Wales? I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know. Magic K sends in a tip and says, "What I'm going to say probably will break your heart, but I think we need to understand a fact that a lot of Snyder fans only get into Zack because he directed superhero films. Once he's not associated with that, they lose interest in his work." Magic K, you know what? You might be right. I mean, I think that's the real point. I mean, let's see. Let's if you're going to support Zack Snyder, you got to support all of him, right? So he's got Army of the Dead coming out in May on Netflix. How exciting is that? You've got to support Army of the Dead. Get on that, son. It looks great. Can't wait. Zack Snyder doing zombies. The one man who I thought was going to fuck up Dawn of the Dead. I was so angry with that guy. I didn't even know who he was, but I liked Dawn of the Dead. I was surprised I liked the remake. Liked it. Magic K says, "I do wish more people watch Army of the Dead, though. I hope so, too." Nick Parrish says, "Also, good news, Rob, not trying to call out your age, but it looks like California government has stopped toying with you and is making people 50 and up eligible for vaccine appointments April 1st. You must be pleased, Rob. Now the ArcLight needs to open." Yes. It's been annoying. I've watched my other friends get vaccinated, but I have not. They have not. I would love to be vaccinated so I can go to the movie theaters, which would be good. I would love that. Brendan Sheehy says, "Rob, your thoughts on Closer, 2005. I think it's an incredibly rare, beautiful beast of a movie with sincerely brutal honesty on show in every scene, with four broken people interacting who both exhilarate and ruin each other's lives in a never-ending toxic spiral." I love Closer. I own the Blu-ray. I've watched it more times than I should. I probably like it more than I should. Mike Nichols directed Closer. Come on, Natalie Portman. I really like Closer a lot, but yeah, man, it's about real toxic people. Not but it's great. I do love Closer, and I'm all down. I'm all in to that. Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls from across the 28 known galaxies. I am bringing in to Robservations episode number 652. Wow, 652. I will not be on the John Campea show tomorrow. Hey, look who's here. Paulie from Latino Slant is here. By the way, if you haven't already, I don't know if you know Paulie or his channel, Latino Slant. He has a fairly new YouTube channel. He just passed 1,000 subscribers. And if I might say, why don't you zip on over to Latino Slant? He covers a lot of local music acts. We streamed together and did the epic Blood In, Blood Out cast and crew reunion that he put together. And it was amazing. And by the way, you can watch it too. It's really long, but it's really worth watching if you're a fan of Blood In, Blood Out. But Latino Slant is here. Go give him a subscription and subscribe to his channel. Hit that notification bell. See, I'm not even telling you to subscribe to my channel. Go subscribe to his channel, and let's make it bigger because he's going to be doing some really interesting and exciting things. I'm really excited about the musical component he already has going. I want to delve more into that. But yes, and Latino Slant says, "R&B, I love Zach's Dawn 300 and Watchmen." My God, you should. And I'm hoping, I didn't know there was an extended cut of Sucker Punch. I mean, I did, but I haven't seen it. I ordered Sucker Punch. It hasn't come yet, but I ordered it last week. So where's my Sucker Punch, Amazon? But thanks for writing in, Polly. I appreciate it. Stub McShave says, Richard Burton called Eastwood a punk in Where Eagles Dare. Of course he did. How could I have forgotten that? That's not good. I love Where Eagles Dare. By the way, if you've never heard of the movie Where Eagles Dare with Richard Burton and Clint Eastwood, it's a World War II movie. If you have never heard of it, go watch Critical Drinker's review of Where Eagles Dare and tell me you don't want to watch that. It's great. Duroc Media says, "Sup, Rob? I heard good things from Stuckman's review on Bob Odenkirk's Nobody, hyped more than before, and the new Godzilla vs. Kong trailer, International, was fire." Duroc Media, you are not wrong. That Chinese trailer for Godzilla vs. Kong, that shit was fire, and there was a lot of fires burning in the cities after that. So yes, I can't wait. Now, Bob Odenkirk is in a new movie called Nobody from the John Wick guys or some of the producers. It looks great. It looks great. I love movies like that. And it looks like the action's intense, and Connie Nielsen's in it. I'll watch anything Connie Nielsen's in. I think everybody would. So it looks great. But anyway, I do want to say to everyone, the end of Robservations episode 652, I want to thank my moderators. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank The Richard is here. I want to thank Justin Toner, Louise X Sparrow. I love seeing X Sparrow. That's cool. Justin, of course. I don't know who else is here. Let me look. Darren Seeley is here. Bunyan Snipe is here. All you guys are here. I don't know if Greg Smith is here because he wasn't feeling well. But yeah, what a great... My moderators are the best. Thank you, moderators, for being here. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel via super chats and tips and all that. Subscribe, hit that like button. We're getting those subscriptions, man. You know, I can't believe it. We might hit 40,000 subscriptions. I would love to see 40,000 subscribers in the next couple weeks. That'd be a good thing. My goal for this year is 50,000 subscribers. I don't know why, but I'm halfway to getting, like, I'm obsessed one day with getting... You can't be on YouTube and do YouTube shows and not want to get that YouTube plaque. You know, the thing, you have 100,000 subscribers. I mean, that would be a big thing for me. I don't know how long. I guess it would take me another 2.5 years to get to 100,000 subscribers. Or maybe I have to find another Star Wars script and review that. But I'd probably get demonetized or thrown off YouTube or something. But, yeah, thank you for all that support. I appreciate it. If you do want to send me letters, you can. I still have a lot more to read, but I read letters every day. Luckily, there weren't that many today. So send them to me. You can go to the Burnettwork.net website, and most of the letters I read are up on that website. You can comment on them. There's all kinds of stuff on the website. We add to it all the time. So go there, and you can send me letters free of charge and make it good. The letters that people send in to me, I'm constantly astonished by how good they actually are. You are a smart bunch of folks out there. So I want to thank you. I will, of course, be back tomorrow, maybe with a less academic letter. But, you know, I also read that one of the directors of John Wick is going to do wait a minute, hang on. What am I trying to say? I don't even know what I'm trying to say. Why am I signing off here? What I was going to say was that, I had to say I can't. Now I'm on the Heat Vision column. The Ghosts of, Tsushima? Is it Ghost of Tsushima? Is that how you pronounce it? The video game we're talking, I can't believe I didn't bring this up, is going to be directed by one of the guys who directed John Wick. Ghost of Tsushima, right? Tsushima? So there you go. Anyway, before I'm too tongue-tied, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to all of you, have a better day.